With LOTRO turning 15 years old this year, I wanted to run a little test. How well does LOTRO run on the minimum spec machine? Now, all this came about when on one of my streams, you should totally check those out by the way, we came up with the idea of the LOW-TRO machine, a computer that is exactly the minimum specs for the game. I was able to pick up this computer for £24, and lucky me, it pretty much hits the minimum requirements set for the game. With a Core 2 Duo and a whopping 2GB of RAM, this should be at least able to launch the game, right? Well, all it was missing now was a GPU, and that was probably the hardest part of this build, but not for the reasons you would think. I was being pretty strict with the parts for this build, so I wanted something that was directly written on the minimum specs on Steam, which leaves us with a GeForce 7000 or Radeon HD 3000 series card that also has at least 512GB of VRAM. After scouring eBay and searching Wikipedia for a list of all the available cards that fit that criteria, I found two cards, one that should work perfectly fine, and another that I wasn't so sure about. First, I wanted to try out the card that was less likely to work, the GeForce 7900 GS, and the reason I think we're going to have problems with this card is because it actually only has 256MB of VRAM, and as I said before, LOTRO wants a minimum of 512MB, but I wanted to give it a try anyway because I bought it, and then we'll see how it goes with the card. I'm pretty sure will work. And to nobody's surprise, the GeForce 7900 doesn't work. It doesn't even let me launch the game, which I'm quite surprised by, though that might be something to do with another issue. I had some issues with the game files kind of disappearing halfway through, but it won't let me launch it whatsoever, so that one's a dud. Let's try the next one. Okay, so in the end, I actually did get this card working, but it's like the day of release of this video, and I don't really have enough time, unfortunately, to gather all the benchmarks once again. So it does run, surprisingly, but obviously it's not the intended minimum spec, like I said, 256MB of VRAM, so maybe I'll return to this at a later point, but for now, we're just going to focus on the AMD card. Okay, well, I guess we should see how a card that actually meets the minimum requirements handles the game. This is the Radeon HD 3850, which does actually have those 512MB of VRAM in it. Now, surprisingly, this is quite playable, bearing in mind we are running at 1024 by 768, but we are regularly hitting a playable 50 to 60 FPS. Now, I wouldn't trade in my current setup for this by any means, but it's certainly not the worst experience I've ever had playing this game in the last 10 years. Now, the graphs may look a little skewed with the maximum and minimum FPSs, but loading screens do kind of screw those a little bit. But depending on where you are in the game, specifically indoor locations, it is possible for us to be hitting around 150 FPS, which I think is more than perfectly fine. Due to the nature of the Bjorning intro, though, being one long instance, it's probably the best place to test out these cards, since there's no loading screens that drastically affect the FPS. High Elf is also one long instance and is longer, but there is a loading screen in there which makes the graphs look a little bit better than it actually was. Especially when talking to the Nazgul, the FPS did drop to around 30 FPS due to the larger location and many effects happening in the area. Speaking of larger locations, Minas Tirith is a place that even on my current system it can have FPS issues, so let's see how well the LOTRO machine fares in both the regular Minas Tirith and the Midsummer version. As you probably expected, it's not that amazing, with an average of 16 FPS in Minas Tirith and 21 in the Midsummer version, and an occasional black screen, which was a little worrying. It's pretty easy to see what the issue is though, and that is the amount of RAM we have in this system. With only 2GB in total, we're regularly hitting that limit with just LOTRO open, so if we were to upgrade to 4GB, I wonder how much of a difference that would make. Unfortunately, finding a 4GB stick did prove harder than I expected, since originally I thought I had one lying around somewhere, and the one that I did order got delayed and won't be here until well after I plan to have this video out. But as you can see, whilst going through Minas Tirith, we're only hitting like 10-15% sometimes on the GPU, which just shows that it's not being utilized properly, and that's why I think the RAM is a big issue, and I'm sure we could utilize the GPU more if we did have that extra RAM in the system. Now, all of my testing was done on the low preset, since, let's be honest here, this isn't exactly a powerhouse of a PC, and it's also kind of the namesake of the project. But I wanted to check out how the game will actually run at the higher presets and a more modern resolution of 1080p. Ultra high was ultra slow, to no one's surprise, but can we jump the graphics up to medium, which is what I played on for a good 3 to 4 years? The answer is kinda. In the newly released Yonder Shire, I was getting around 60 to 80 FPS on low. Jumping up to medium drops it down to around about 40 to 50, so something between those two presets is clearly having an effect. My guess would be the addition of the 3D character portrait and an increased render range. So can you play LOTRO with the minimum spec machine? The answer is yes. Now, should you go out of your way to get the minimum spec machine to play? I wouldn't suggest it. However, I think it does prove one good thing, especially with the free-to-play changes happening very recently. It basically means that most PCs that you will have already can play it. So any slightly older laptop or, older PC will probably be able to play the game. Whilst not at the higher settings, at least be able to get you into the game and start playing, which is very, very important at the moment with the free rewards that you get just for logging into the game. So that is the LOTRO machine. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's something a little bit different from what I normally do, but I kind of was interested in this topic, and I think the 15-year anniversary was a perfect time opportunity for me to release a video like this. Again, a little bit of a different style, but I enjoyed making it, so I hope you enjoyed watching it. Once again, I stream pretty regularly over on Twitch. If you haven't followed me over there yet, I do stream pretty consistently, so a link to that will be in the description. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.